The air tasted like betrayal and rain-soaked earth. I stood on the polished stone altar, the scent of 1,000 wolves in the crowd, a dizzying, suffocating cloud around me. The entire Shadow Moon pack, my family, my community, was watching. This was the mating ceremony, the most sacred day of a wolf's life. This was the moment I, Sierra Price, would be officially claimed by Brent, the alpha heir. I wore a simple white dress, my heart hammering so hard against my ribs I thought it would shatter the delicate lace. My hand was already outstretched, fingers trembling, waiting for his to close around mine. Brent was magnificent, the pride of the pack. He was tall, his eyes the color of warm whiskey, and his shoulders were broad enough to carry the weight of 1,000 futures. Our future. Alpha Titus, Brent's father and my alpha, stood before us, his voice booming across the grounds. The bond is chosen. The fates have aligned. Brent, will you now seal your claim and take Sierra to be your Luna? Brent looked at me. His whiskey eyes were cold. Not nervous, not excited, but simply cold, like stones at the bottom of a river. A sharp, terrible knot formed in my stomach. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. He didn't move. The silence stretched, a monstrous, echoing thing that swallowed the festive music and the distant sounds of the forest. I felt the prickle of 1,000 eyes and my palms began to sweat. Brent. Alpha Titus prompted, his stern face showing the first signs of impatience. Brent took a slow, deliberate breath and his gaze shifted, sliding past my shoulder. I didn't need to turn to know who stood there. I knew the scent of cinnamon and polished ambition better than my own. Chloe. My beautiful, hateful sister. She stood just behind the front row, wearing a dress that was a shade darker than mine. A dangerous, predatory cream. Her smile was a vicious, triumphant thing. She had always wanted what was mine. My room, my scarf, my place in our mother's good graces. Now she wanted my destiny. Brent finally spoke. His voice was a flat, chilling sound that severed the hopeful thread inside me. I reject this bond, he announced. The words were not a whisper. They were a thunderclap. They weren't a plea for forgiveness. They were a declaration of war. The air broke. A collective gasp ripped through the crowd. The knot in my stomach turned into a searing, agonizing tear. My body went rigid. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I could only stare at the man who was meant to be my future, watching him erase me with a simple, brutal sentence. You cannot, Alpha Titus sputtered, his face mottled with shock and fury. The King's Law. The bond is strong. It is weak, Brent countered, holding his head high. It is an uninspired, lukewarm tie to a woman who is unsuited. Unsuited. My vision blurred. Tears burned, but I squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to let them fall. Not here. Not for him. I had to remain standing. If I fell, they would crush me entirely. I heard Chloe's sickeningly sweet voice from the crowd, loud enough for everyone to hear. Perhaps she didn't try hard enough to hold him, brother. Some wolves just aren't meant for the Luna title. The mocking laughter that followed was the final shard of glass in my heart. The pain was absolute, physical. It wasn't the pain of a rejected mate. It was the profound, soul-deep agony of being mocked by the pack, discarded like trash on the most important day of my life. I was no longer Sierra. I was the girl who wasn't good enough. Sierra, Alpha Titus said, his tone now cold, professional and final. By the laws of our pack and the ruling of the council, you are now a bondless female. Due to the high-profile nature of this rejection, you are considered a disruptive influence. I have no choice but to issue a decree of banishment. You have until the next dawn to leave Shadow Moon territory. Banishment. A death sentence. A life alone, constantly running, constantly fearing the rogue wolves. I looked at Brent one last time. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He was staring at Chloe, a flicker of something close to lust in his eyes. He had chosen her ambition over my heart. The tears finally fell, but they were tears of rage, not sorrow. You think I'm weak? You think I'm worthless? You think you can simply throw me away? I turned my back on the altar, on Brent, on Alpha Titus, and on the 1,000 laughing, judging faces. My white dress, the dress of my promised future, felt like a shroud. I walked. I didn't run. I walked with slow, deliberate steps down the aisle of spectators, forcing them to look at the mess they had made. And then I saw him. He was sitting not far from the perimeter wall, a figure of absolute neglect. He was dressed in thick, filthy rags, his face shadowed by a hood. He had been there for days, a silent, cold/distant beggar that the pack had quietly tolerated but always ignored. He never spoke. He never asked for food. He simply existed at the edge of their world, a living symbol of the poverty and desperation they liked to pretend didn't exist. As I walked toward him, I saw his eyes in the shadow of his hood. They were a breathtaking, intense silver like freshly mined ore, and they were fixed on me with an alarming, unnerving clarity. The crowd watched me, their mockery replaced by confusion. What is she doing? I stopped directly in front of him. He was a good foot taller than I was, even sitting down, his frame strangely powerful beneath the tattered cloth. He smelled faintly of rain and earth, not the perfume and polished wood of the ceremony. He was nothing. He had nothing. If I am to be banished, if I am to have no mate, if I am to be nobody, then I will choose my ruin. This was my last desperate act of defiance. This was me spitting in the face of their hierarchy, their laws, and their precious, perfect pack. I leaned down. My hands cupped his rough, unshaven cheeks. His silver eyes widened, showing a flash of pure shock, but he didn't pull away. The crowd was utterly silent now, held in a paralyzing tension. I pressed my mouth to his. It was not a gentle kiss of love. It was a fierce, desperate kiss/claim of ownership. I bit down hard on his lower lip, drawing a pinprick of blood, a primitive, painful act of claiming that went against every formal rule. My wolf, wounded and raging, roared the claim into the silent air. You cannot banish me as bondless. I am claimed. I pulled back, breathing heavily, my eyes locked on his. The pain in my lip was nothing compared to the shock in his eyes. The beggar had been claimed by the rejected, banished mate. I turned back to face the altar, a fierce, reckless joy replacing the sorrow. Alpha Titus. I am claimed. You cannot banish a claimed mate. Alpha Titus was purple with rage. You dare claim a beggar. This is not a legal bond. Execution is a more fitting punishment for this treason. Treason. A new voice cut through the air. It was deep, resonant, and impossibly powerful. It didn't boom like Alpha Titus's. It simply commanded the air around it to be silent. It came from the beggar. He stood up. He didn't move fast, but the rising was a slow, terrifying reveal of power. The ragged hood fell back. His face was sharp, chiseled, and devastatingly handsome. His silver eyes were no longer merely clear. They were blazing with a raw, terrifying alpha power that made every single wolf in the crowd, including Alpha Titus, drop to their knees, their heads bowed low in utter submission. He was massive. Every inch of his body screamed lethal, disciplined strength. The air around him thickened with the scent of true dominance, of power that belonged to an empire, not a pack. The scent of a Lycan king. He slowly reached up and touched the spot on his lip where I had bitten him, his silver eyes never leaving mine. You called it treason, the beggar said, his voice a smooth, silken menace directed at Alpha Titus. You called her unsuited. You called my bond a beggar's claim. Alpha Titus was shaking violently, his face pressed to the dirt. He was too terrified to speak. The king, my claimed mate, took one step toward the altar, the movement of a predator. I am Liam, the Alpha King of all Lycans, he stated, his voice a hammer blow of authority. And I was merely observing your pack's true nature. You rejected my mate. You banished my mate. And you insulted the claim I had accepted. Rise, Alpha Titus. Look at the Luna you have lost. He turned his back on the terrified Alpha, and his silver gaze settled back on me. His face was unreadable, cold, distant. But his hand was extended. You claimed me, Sierra Price. You did not know who I was, but you chose me over your rejection and your fear. You chose defiance. The bond is sealed. You are mine. The entire Shadow Moon pack watched, paralyzed, as the rejected, banished girl placed her small hand in the Alpha King's enormous, powerful one. My life was over. And a terrifying, utterly electric new one had just begun. Thank you for joining in on this journey. Where are you watching from, and how is the weather there today? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like this story, subscribe for more intense romance, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next interesting story. The transition from the dirt ground of my public humiliation to the back seat of a black, armored Lycan transport was instantaneous and utterly surreal. One moment I was standing beside a man in rags. The next I was being helped into a vehicle that smelled like rich leather and latent electricity. The silence was the worst part. It was thick, heavy, and absolute. Liam the Alpha King sat beside me. He didn't look at me. He just stared out the tinted window as the car, which was less a car and more a moving fortress, pulled away from the Shadow Moon Pact territory. We left behind a scene of absolute chaos. The paralyzed wolves, the horrified face of Alpha Titus, and the faint, pathetic whimper of Brent. I, Sierra Price, the girl destined for banishment, was now sharing a confined space with the most powerful being in the Lycan world. My hands still trembled, but the shock was slowly giving way to a sickening wave of adrenaline and fear. I glanced at him. His clothes were no longer rags. As soon as we were inside the car, a sharp-faced silent man, clearly an elite guard, had produced a simple dark tunic that Liam had pulled over his head. It was tailored, emphasizing the terrifying breadth of his shoulders. I swallowed, the sound loud in the enclosed space. "You weren't truly a beggar," I finally managed, the words catching in my throat. He turned his head slowly, and those silver eyes, no longer just clear but shining with an inner light, impaled me. The look was cold, assessing, and entirely devoid of warmth. "No," he confirmed, his voice low, a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floor of the vehicle. "I was observing. I spend months in disguise every year, testing the leadership and empathy of my packs. Most failed spectacularly." He paused, his lip curling slightly. "Your former alpha's response to a common beggar was insufficient. His judgment of your worth was unforgivable. Your pack is corrupt. And Brent," I whispered, the name tasting like ash. Did he know?" "No one knew." Liam's gaze hardened. If he had known, he would have fawned. The test was in the rejection of the insignificant. He rejected his mate for ambition, convinced by your treacherous sister Chloe that I would favor a pack with a stronger political alliance. He proved his own insignificance. I finally let the raw emotion out, not tears but a bitter, shaking laugh. "So, I was rejected, disgraced, and almost banished, all because of a test? You were rejected because your mate was weak. You were disgraced because your sister is jealous. You were almost banished because your alpha is a fool," he corrected me, his tone clipped. "But your final action was your own. You chose defiance. You chose me." He leaned closer, and the sheer force of his presence was overwhelming. My breath hitched. "You sealed the mate bond on a beggar who could offer you nothing but ruin. Why did you risk execution for that insult to your alpha?" The question demanded the complete truth. I looked at the hands resting in my lap, trying to regain my composure. "Because they took everything from me," I confessed, my voice shaking with renewed anger. "They took my dignity. They took my home. They took my future. I was facing banishment either way, a slow, terrifying death. I chose a quick, defiant death. I chose to show them that my destiny was mine to decide, even if it meant choosing a life of nothingness over their pity." He was silent for a long moment, studying my face, my eyes, the tremble of my jaw. I didn't flinch away. I met his gaze, letting him see the defiance I had spoken of. "Defiance," he repeated almost to himself. A flicker, something unreadable, crossed the silver depths of his eyes. "A useful trait." He sat back abruptly, the intimacy broken. "Understand this, Sierra Price. You are now the mate of the Alpha King. You are the future Luna of all Lycans. That kiss was not a game. It was a binding, ancient claim. There is no undoing it. You carry a weight you did not ask for, a crown you did not seek. You are no longer just yours." The word Luna felt foreign and impossible. "I don't know the first thing about being a Luna," I admitted, my voice small. "I'm an Omega in my pack. I was always the overlooked one." "The title is earned through strength, not lineage," he stated simply. "Your strength was proven today. Now you must learn to wield it. We are going to the capital, the fortress of the Twin Moons. You will be introduced to the council within the week." I felt a sudden, sharp panic. "The council? They won't accept me. I don't have the status. I don't have the training. I don't even have my full shift yet." "They will accept you because they will accept me," Liam said, his voice flat, emotionless. "The king is absolute. My claim is law. However, they will try to test you. They will challenge you. They will look for any sign of weakness, and they will use your rejection by a minor pack heir as proof of your unworthiness. He finally offered a piece of advice, a warning that felt more like a demand. Do not speak of your past. Do not mention Brent. Do not mention your sister. You are a clean slate. You are the king's chosen. Act like it. He looked utterly indifferent to my fate, yet his words carried an authority that settled the frantic buzzing in my mind. He was cold, yes, but he was also a force of nature. A man who simply dictated reality. The car slowed, pulling up to a private airstrip. A massive jet, sleek, black, and radiating expense, waited on the tarmac. This was not a trip across state lines. This was an intercontinental relocation. My simple bag with 2 changes of clothes seemed pathetic. As we exited the car, the sharp-faced guards moved with military precision. I felt completely exposed, utterly out of place. Liam stopped just before the steps of the jet, turning to me. He reached out and gently touched the corner of my mouth where I had bitten him, his thumb brushing the minuscule healing mark. When we land, the world will see you, he said, his silver eyes dark with intent. You will be dressed in fine silks. You will be attended by those who command packs. You will be seated on a throne. You will be tested, Luna. The price for failure is high. Do not shame the choice you made on a desperate whim. What is the price? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The price is simple, he stated, his face utterly serious. Loss of the kingdom's respect. And that, in my world, is worse than death. My kinghood is absolute, but a divided court is a weak court. You will stand by me, silent, graceful, and defiant, or you will fall alone. He didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and ascended the steps of the jet. I followed, the wind whipping my plain white dress around my legs, the cold reality of my new life sinking in. I had traded a simple banishment for a complex public trial with the highest possible stakes. I had claimed a beggar, but I was about to face a king's burden. Inside the jet, everything was silent opulence. But it was still a cage. A very, very expensive cage. I sank into a plush seat across a massive mahogany table. Liam was already opening a secured tablet, working, completely ignoring me. I was just part of the furniture now, the new object he had acquired with a claimed kiss. My gaze fell on my reflection in the dark window. The rejected mate. The banished girl. Now, the Luna? I closed my eyes and whispered a thought to the man across from me, a reckless challenge in my tired mind. I may be the rejected girl, but I am the one who claimed you. That gives me power to. A beat of silence. Then Liam looked up from his tablet, his silver eyes burning holes through me. He lowered his device, a hint of something dangerous and possessive in his expression. Did you just try to speak to me, Sierra? My heart leaped into my throat. I hadn't spoken aloud. I had used my unhidden power/shift, the rudimentary mind-speak that all wolves possessed but that was considered deeply impolite and reserved only for the mate bond. Had he heard my private thought? I didn't say anything, I stammered, my cheeks burning. Yes, you did, he contradicted, his voice soft, almost a purr. You challenged me. You reminded me that you made the first move. Be careful, Luna. A king can only be reminded of his mate's power so many times before he has to enforce his own dominance. He had heard my thoughts. The truth of our bond, an intense, unwanted connection forged in defiance, was already too deep to hide. I had to learn how to survive this king and the destiny I had stolen for myself. The fortress of the Twin Moons was not a quaint castle. It was a sprawling, modern citadel carved into a granite mountain range, overlooking a valley in a secluded, unnamed territory in the northern United States. Its architecture was all sharp angles, dark glass, and an oppressive sense of ancient power mixed with absolute security. When the jet landed, the air of quiet, contained power surrounding Liam intensified. The moment the ramp lowered, I was greeted by a regiment of elite Lycan warriors, all towering figures who lowered their heads in perfect synchronicity. They wore sleek, black uniforms, and their eyes were filled with fierce, unquestioning loyalty to the man beside me. I was immediately taken to a sprawling, silent suite. The guards, all women silent and efficient, moved me through massive rooms, each one decorated with frighteningly expensive and impossibly old artifacts. Before I could process the shock of the marble floors and the 20-foot ceilings, I was handed over to a team of dedicated human servants, all of whom acted with terrified deference. A sharp-featured, elegant woman named Vera was introduced as my personal attendant. She spoke in hushed, precise tones, moving like a shadow. Luna, Vera murmured, bowing deeply, the king requires you to be prepared for the evening assembly. You must be presentable. Your old clothes are being disposed of. I didn't argue. My plain white dress, the dress of my rejection, felt like a symbol of shame I was desperate to shed. For the next hour I was subjected to a blur of activity. My hair was washed, brushed, and styled into an elegant cascade. My skin was treated with creams that smelled of jasmine and wealth. And then came the dress. Vera presented a garment that looked like liquid midnight. It was a gown of deep sapphire velvet, cut to emphasize my height and curve, severe yet undeniably beautiful. As she helped me fasten the intricate clasps, I caught my reflection in a massive ornate mirror. The rejected girl was gone. In her place was a woman who looked cold, powerful, and utterly out of place. The dress was a mask and I was wearing it for survival. You must wear this, Luna, Vera whispered, fastening a massive silver necklace around my throat. It was heavy, cool metal and it pulsed faintly with a deep, hidden magic. It is the king's mark. It shows your bond is true and protects you from certain discomforts. I touched the silver, its weight grounding me slightly. Discomforts. Vera's eyes flickered, but she remained composed. The scrutiny of the council. Their doubt. They will test your stability, Luna. The king expects you to be a fortress tonight, just like this home. As if summoned by the mention of him, the door to the suite opened. Liam stood there. He was no longer the imposing stranger from the jet. He was wearing formal Lycan attire, a dark, structured tunic embroidered with silver threads that matched his eyes, and thick leather armor on his forearms. He was breathtaking, terrifying, and every bit the absolute ruler. The air in the room actually thrummed with his dominance. He dismissed Vera and the attendants with a single sharp gesture. They scattered instantly. He walked toward me, his movements slow and deliberate, stopping just inches away. I had to tilt my head back considerably to meet his gaze. Impressive, he stated, his voice devoid of praise, simply factual. The mask suits you. It's not a mask, I contradicted, pulling on the defiance that was my only true weapon. It's the dress of the woman who claimed you, King Liam. A sudden, dangerous smile touched the corner of his mouth. It wasn't warm, it was predatory. Don't forget yourself, Sierra. I may allow the defiance in private but never in public. You made the claim, yes. But I accepted it. That distinction is the difference between a wife and a casualty. He reached out and gently traced the line of the silver necklace on my throat. The silver was cold against my skin, but his touch sent a jolt of unwanted, electric heat through me. The council is gathered, he continued, his tone switching back to business. They are comprised of the oldest, wealthiest, and most influential pack alphas. They believe my decision to take a mate from outside their designated pool is an insult. They expected a princess. They expected an alliance. They got you, a rejected mate from a minor pack. He pulled his hand away, the distance between us suddenly vast again. They will try to find a reason to call your claim void. They will argue that the bond is fraudulent, that you used a hidden trick. They believe you are an ugly duckling who somehow snared the king. And if they succeed? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The magnitude of the price I faced became crushingly real. If they succeed, Liam said simply, his silver eyes flashing, the bond will be dissolved by the High Priestess, and your previous banishment will be enforced by the king's decree. No pack would dare take you in. You would be a lone rogue in the truest sense. You would be utterly alone, forever hunted. He offered me his arm, the gesture formal and demanding. But they will not succeed. Not if you remember your rage. They saw you weak once. They will never see it again. You are the Alpha King's mate. You will be silent and allow my power to eclipse your flaw. I placed my hand on his arm, and the moment my fingers touched his sleeve, the subtle, terrifying power that defined him seemed to flow into me. It was not gentle, it was commanding. It was a promise of safety, but at the cost of my will. We walked out of the suite and into the fortress proper. The journey to the great hall felt like walking through a gauntlet. Everywhere we went, guards snapped to attention and powerful-looking Lycans. Servants, officials, advisors, dropped into deep, respectful bows. They weren't bowing to me, the rejected girl. They were bowing to the sheer, terrifying power of the king. When we reached the massive oak doors of the great hall, Liam stopped. He looked down at me, his face a perfect mask of cold authority. The greatest power a Luna can wield is not magic or strength but silence, he instructed. Let them speak. Let them judge. Let them make their mistake. Your only job is to be my mate. Nothing more. The doors swung inward with a heavy, grinding sound. The great hall was immense, lit by thousands of flickering candles. In the center, seated in a massive, intimidating semicircle, was the Lycan Council. 24 alphas and influential figures, all watching our entrance with expressions ranging from intense curiosity to outright hostility. The air was electric with judgment and power. I felt my omega roots, the feeling of being low on the hierarchy, try to surface, the instinct to duck my head and submit. I fought it, using the memory of Brent's cruel rejection and Chloe's triumphant smile as fuel. Liam led me straight toward two magnificent thrones placed at the head of the hall. His throne was dark wood and ancient runes. Mine was identical, a clear statement of shared power, and its cold, hard surface beckoned me like a trap. As we ascended the steps, one man detached himself from the council. He was old, sharp-eyed, and carried the scent of ancient lineage. Alpha Sebastian, the most vocal critic of the crown. He bowed, but the respect did not reach his eyes. "High King," he addressed Liam, his voice smooth and oily. "We welcome you and your unexpected guest. But before we begin the assembly, we must ask a formal question of the woman you have brought here." Liam stopped, his hand still on my arm. He looked at Alpha Sebastian with an expression so cold it could shatter glass. "You will address the Luna with the respect her station commands." "Of course, my apologies," Sebastian simpered, turning his gaze on me, his eyes running over my figure, dismissive and challenging. "Luna Sierra. You are well aware that the strength of a bond is tested by the shift. The king must have a mate of proven strength. You were claimed by your previous pack heir, but you are still widely known to have an untested shift. We ask, will you reveal your wolf now? Prove your power." The challenge was absolute. A shift was intensely private, deeply connected to a wolf's spirit, and performing it under the hostile scrutiny of the council was a monstrous demand. It was meant to make me fail. It was meant to be the magic test/trial that proved me unworthy. I felt the blood drain from my face. My wolf was still fractured, still wounded from the rejection, and the thought of trying to force a shift now in this place made my knees weak. I heard Liam's low growl, a warning note vibrating in his chest. But before he could refuse the demand for me, I remembered his words. "Your only job is to be my mate. Be silent and allow my power to eclipse your flaw." I stood taller, forcing my spine straight. I kept my hand firmly on his arm, looking Sebastian straight in the eye. I didn't open my mouth. I didn't try to defend myself. I simply met the hostile alpha's gaze with the same defiant intensity one had shown at the ceremony. I let my silence be the answer. I let the authority of the king whose arm I gripped be the only validation I offered. The silence stretched, unbearable. Alpha Sebastian's smile wavered, unsure how to handle the complete refusal to engage. Finally, Liam moved. He pressed his lips to my temple. A simple, possessive gesture that was also a terrifying public display of claim. "The Luna will reveal her power when she chooses, and only for me," Liam stated, his voice a quiet storm of dominance. "The bond is proven by the claim and accepted by the king. We are done with this pretense. Sit. Now." He guided me to my throne and made me sit first. The moment I settled onto the hardwood, he sat beside me, his scent, raw power and cold metal, enveloping me. It was a clear message to the council. She is mine. Touch her and you deal with me. As the council meeting began, all eyes were still on me. The challenge had been met and deflected, but the tension was almost suffocating. I sat on the throne of the Lycan kingdom, the symbol of absolute power, but I was still the rejected mate, the underdog sitting in judgment. I had survived the first test, but I knew with chilling certainty that it was only the beginning. I closed my eyes briefly, focusing on the heavy, protective weight of the silver necklace. I had chosen defiance, and now I would have to pay the ultimate price of survival. Never being truly myself again. The council meeting was a 3-hour marathon of veiled insults, political posturing and endless scrutiny aimed squarely at my sapphire velvet-clad back. I adhered strictly to Liam's command. I remained silent, graceful, and utterly still on the throne. I was the centerpiece of a hostile exhibition, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Liam, however, was magnificent in his defense of me. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't argue, he simply presented reality as an absolute. When Alpha Sebastian tried to revisit the issue of my unproven bloodline, Liam cut him off with a chilling finality. "The bloodline is irrelevant," Liam said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "The bond is proven by the claim and consecrated by the king's acceptance. I will not have my personal decisions debated by the collective. Your silence is required, not your advice." The power of an Alpha King was an overwhelming, terrifying thing. It wasn't just dominance. It was the ability to rewrite the rules of existence with a single command. Watching him wield it, I realized I hadn't just claimed a man. I had claimed a force of nature. When the assembly finally dispersed, the collective bowing was even lower than before. They were terrified of him, and by extension they were afraid of me. Fear was a cold comfort, but it was comfort nonetheless. As soon as the last council member was gone, Liam stood, the sudden movement causing the heavy silence to rush back in. He didn't look tired. He looked intensely focused, like a predator who had finished a successful hunt. "You performed well," he stated, walking down the steps toward the hall's massive doors. It was the closest thing to a compliment he had ever given me. "You held your composure. You are learning." I pushed myself off the hard, high seat of the throne, my muscles aching from the strain of my stillness. "I learned that your authority is the only thing protecting me from a slow death, Liam. That's a powerful motivator." He paused at the door, turning back to face me. The candlelight caught the ruthless sharpness of his cheekbones. "Survival is always the greatest motivation, Sierra. You chose life when you could have chosen despair. I respect that." He then led me through a hidden passage behind the hall, down winding stone stairs that smelled of ancient magic and cold earth. This was the fortress's true heart, shielded from the public eye. We descended into what looked like a personal command center. Maps glowed softly on screens, documents were stacked on dark wood tables, and a few silent advisors were working diligently. The scent of ozone and power was strongest here. "Tomorrow the preparations for the consecration ceremony begin," Liam informed me, his eyes sweeping over the complex machinery. "It is a necessity to silence the council's doubts. But first we must establish the terms of our dangerous pact." He walked over to a table and picked up a heavy old book bound in dark leather. It looked like an artifact, not a readable text. He didn't offer it to me. "You have claimed me as your mate and I have accepted," he continued, speaking less to me and more to the arrangement itself. "The bond is physical, spiritual, and magically absolute. I already hear your thoughts when your emotional guard drops, and I know you hear mine. But there is a flaw in this claim." My heart hammered. The rejection? The fact that Brent was my previous? No. That is a political flaw, not a magical one. He opened the heavy book, revealing pages covered in ancient, spidery script. "The flaw is the true bond. We share the basic connection, but we do not share the emotional devotion that ensures the stability of the entire kingdom. My king wolf is bound to you. But the man, Liam, is distant. You know this." He was acknowledging his cold/distant flaw openly, brutally. It was unnerving. "You are cold," I agreed, simply meeting his gaze. "You treat me like a high-value asset, not a mate." "Precisely. And until that emotional bond forms, if it ever does, we face risk. My position is stable, but yours is not. The council will attack this deficiency. They will try to introduce a challenge, perhaps even a potential second mate, if I show any sign of emotional weakness toward you." He closed the book with a heavy thud. "I need a Luna who is a symbol of strength and stability, not a vulnerable asset. I need you to commit to this partnership without requiring the emotional return that you obviously desire." I felt the sting of his brutal honesty, but I suppressed it. "What do you require, King Liam?" "First, loyalty, absolute and unquestioning even when I seem cruel. Second, silence on all matters of state and my personal life. Third, you must never contact your former pack, your sister Chloe or Brent. They are ghosts. If you look back, they will become targets. They must believe you are lost to them forever." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. My family, my past, wiped away by a single kiss. The price was heavy. "And what do I get in return?" I challenged, crossing my arms. "A throne and a gilded cage? The king's protection." He walked toward me, the air crackling between us. He stopped until his chest was just inches from mine, forcing me to lean back slightly. You get protection, yes. But you get more, he murmured, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that seemed to speak directly to my wolf. You get the ultimate power to survive. You get status no amount of begging could have bought you. And you get the chance to be the woman who rejected the rejection. You get to defy every person who ever called you unsuited. His eyes dropped to my lips, lingering briefly. And you get to explore a unique, intense mate bond that was forged in fire, not sentimentality. A bond where the wolf is absolute and the man is learning. He reached out and traced the sharp line of my jaw with the pad of his thumb. The contact was electric, a sudden, powerful surge of connection that stole my breath. It wasn't affection. It was a potent reminder of the binding magic between us. This is not a marriage of love, Sierra. It is a partnership of power. We are the king and the Luna. We present a unified, unbreakable front to the world. If you falter, the kingdom suffers. If I falter, you are exposed. Are you willing to be my partner in this dangerous game? His silver eyes searched mine, demanding an answer that went beyond words. This was the true pivot/reveal of our relationship. The realization that the cold king needed me just as much as I needed his protection. It was a trade of devotion for safety, vulnerability for power. I am a rejected mate, King Liam, I stated, my voice strong, refusing to tremble. I know what it is to be discarded. I will never allow that weakness to be seen again. I accept your terms. I will be the silent Luna, the fortress at your side. He stared at me for another long moment, his gaze penetrating, assessing the depth of my resolve. Then slowly, a barely perceptible nod. Good, he said, pulling away and walking back toward the map screen, the discussion over as quickly as it had begun. Now, there is a matter of the immediate future. The Council's greatest fear is the unveiling of the next generation. They require a successor. He turned back, his expression businesslike. The consecration ceremony will not only formalize your status as Luna, but it will also initiate the ritual for the pregnancy/child reveal. We must show them that the bloodline is secured. We will be publicly claiming a future child, Sierra. You must prepare yourself for that. Our bond is strong enough to allow it. My eyes widened in genuine shock. A child. A fake pregnancy. A political move so audacious it staggered me. I had kissed a beggar on a whim, and now I was being told to prepare to carry the heir of the Lycan kingdom. The stakes had just soared into the impossible. The prospect of announcing a future pregnancy/child reveal, a pure fabrication for political gain, sent a wave of cold dread through me. I was the rejected mate, the girl who had been banned for being unsuited, and now I was being thrust into the highest echelons of Lycan politics, forced to participate in a lie that guaranteed the king's stability and, consequently, my life. I stared at Liam, speechless, the magnitude of the demand settling heavily on my shoulders. A false pregnancy, I finally repeated, my voice hollow. You want me to stand before the entire kingdom and lie about bearing your heir? It is not a lie, it is a declaration of intent, Liam corrected, his expression unyielding. He walked to a high window overlooking the vast, snow-dusted valley. The bond is new, but it is absolute. The council sees me as a loose thread, an alpha king without a formal alliance, whose claim on the throne rests solely on my strength. They fear that without a declared heir, the succession will become a bloodbath upon my eventual demise. He turned back, his silver eyes fixed on me. The unveiling of the Luna must be accompanied by the assurance of the next generation. The strength of the Lycans is in our future. We will use the magic of the consecration ceremony to project the possibility of a child, which the council will be forced to accept as a fact. But what about later? I asked, struggling to keep my voice even. What happens when there is no child? When the lie is discovered? Liam's jaw tightened. By then the political climate will be secured. By then the truth may no longer be a lie. The bond, though forced, is real, Sierra. When we share the physical claim, the spiritual bond will deepen. The king wolf is already committed. The implication of that statement, the expectation of a full, intimate mate bond as a necessary element of the political strategy, made my cheeks flush. I had only known this man for a matter of hours, and the world expected me to share his bed and his lineage. You speak of this as if I am merely a vessel for your political survival, I challenged, ignoring the sudden heat in my face. I gave you defiance. I didn't give you subservience. And I need that defiance, Luna, he countered, stepping closer, his imposing presence overwhelming the small space. I need the defiance that led you to spit in the face of banishment. I need you to defy the council's expectations of a meek mate. I need you to stand tall during this ceremony, look them in the eye, and make them believe you are the mother of my future. He reached out, and this time his touch wasn't commanding, it was a careful, almost clinical assessment. He lifted a strand of my hair, running the dark silk between his fingers. You were the poor girl, the overlooked Omega. You were never meant to stand here. Use that. Let your perceived flaws become your greatest armor. Show them that the Alpha King chose the one person brave enough to choose him back, regardless of his status. His words struck a chord, tapping into the deep well of anger and rejection that had been my only companion for so long. He wasn't asking for my love, he was asking for my rage. The consecration ceremony is in 2 days, he announced, releasing my hair and stepping back. Until then you will be trained. You will learn the history, the laws, and the etiquette. Most importantly, you will learn to manage the thoughts of your wolf. He walked over to a secure door, signaling his intent to leave. We will begin to share the mental link actively. It is vital that no council member or political rival hears her thoughts, your fear, your doubt, your memory of Brent, or the truth of your past. I watched him, my heart heavy with the weight of the life I had destroyed and the impossible one I was building. Liam, I called out, using his name for the first time without the formality of his title. He paused, his hand on the door, his silver eyes turning back, waiting. My sister, Chloe. I forced the words out, the sound tasting like poison. She was the one who whispered the lies to Brent. She was the one who wanted my place. She is the true rival. Liam simply nodded, his expression cold and confirming. I know. The pack's internal affairs were thoroughly monitored. Her actions led to a massive shift in territory power, an obvious political maneuver. She is a traitor to your bond and a criminal to the crown. He opened the door and stepped halfway through. Your past is dead, Sierra. But I guarantee you this. Your rejection will not go unpunished. Your sister, your former Alpha, and Brent will all face justice for insulting the Alpha King's mate. That is my promise. He gave me one last, piercing look. A look that held the absolute guarantee of protection and the chilling threat of domination. Rest now. You have much to learn before you face the world as my Luna. The door closed with a heavy thud, leaving me alone in the silent, magnificent suite. The next 48 hours were a relentless blur of mental and physical preparation. Vera, my attendant, moved like a drill sergeant in silk, forcing me to memorize names of ancient Lycan houses and complicated political histories. But the most grueling part was the mental training with Liam. We would sit for hours, separated by a vast room, focusing on controlling the intense, unwanted mental link. Do not think of your mother's disapproval, he would command silently, his thoughts cutting through my mind like a sharp blade. I am not. I would accidentally respond in a flash of defensiveness and he would recoil, his expression pained. Control Sierra. He would project. That doubt is audible. Your wolf is crying over the loss of your past. I need her to roar with pride for the future. It was a painful, frustrating process. My wolf was still the rejected mate, constantly whimpering in the back of my mind, reminding me that I was a fraud. Liam's presence was a constant, cold pressure, demanding perfection. The night before the ceremony, I was exhausted, sitting alone in the library that was attached to my suite, surrounded by books I couldn't focus on. I felt like a fragile vase filled with nitroglycerin, ready to shatter at the slightest pressure. Liam entered without knocking. He wasn't wearing his formal attire. He was in simple dark trousers and a soft, expensive shirt, still impossibly large, still radiating power but less rigid. He didn't speak. He simply walked toward me, his movements fluid and unnerving. He stopped and knelt on one knee before me, a position that was completely unnatural for the Alpha King. My breath hitched. Liam. He didn't look up but reached out and gently took my hands, running his thumb over my wrist. The consecration ceremony will be overwhelming, he murmured, his voice low, intimate, and closer to true concern than I had ever heard. It involves the sharing of blood and a temporary, intense merging of our wolves' minds. It is powerful magic. It will feel like the world is collapsing into the two of us. And the heir lie? That is where the pressure will be greatest, he admitted, finally lifting his eyes to mine. The magic will test our commitment. It will scan the truth of our bond. You must focus, Sierra. You must believe that the child is coming, that it is only a matter of time. You must hold the intent of the heir. He squeezed my hands, his touch surprisingly steadying. I know this is unfair. I know I am asking for everything and giving you only a cold throne in return. But I need you to survive this. Not just for the kingdom but for the girl who dared to kiss a beggar. You deserve more than banishment. He stood up, the moment of vulnerability gone, replaced by the rigid Alpha King. The ceremony requires a full spiritual acceptance, he stated, his silver eyes darkening. We will not be truly prepared until we share the first kiss/claim born of mutual need. A necessity, not an insult. He tilted my head back, his fingers cool against my skin. Don't think of the past. Don't think of the pack. Think only of the cold survival that demands this. Think of the defiance. And then he kissed me. It wasn't the desperate, frantic claim of the ceremony. It was slow, deep, and possessive, a sealing of the pact. It was the king staking his territory on his Luna's very spirit. A powerful, consuming act that promised the end of my life as Sierra Price and the brutal beginning of the Luna. I had kissed a beggar. Now I was being claimed by a king. The day of the consecration ceremony dawned cold and silent, the fortress shrouded in a blanket of new snow. I stood before a massive floor-to-ceiling window in my suite, watching the preparations in the courtyard below. The sheer scale of the event was staggering. Wolves from every major pack in the United States were gathering, their scents mingling in the crisp air. 1,000 powerful eyes were about to be fixed on me. I was dressed in a simple but impossibly luxurious gown of pure white silk, embroidered with ancient Lycan symbols. The heavy, protective silver necklace from the council meeting was gone, replaced by the Luna's crown, a delicate circlet of interwoven silver that felt impossibly light, yet radiated an intimidating aura. It was a tangible symbol of the power I was now required to project. Vera fussed with the final details of the veil that cascaded down my back. You look every inch the Luna, Sierra, she murmured, a genuine hint of awe in her voice. The king has done well. The king has done well to acquire a suitable facade, my inner voice countered, sharp with self-doubt. I reached up and touched the crown, trying to anchor myself in the persona Liam had trained me to wear. I am not Sierra Price, the rejected mate. I am the Luna. I am the defiance. I am the fortress. The king entered, and the temperature in the room instantly dropped by 10 degrees. He was wearing the full regalia of the Lycan king, ceremonial silver armor over a dark tunic, his broad shoulders seeming to carry the weight of the entire territory. He was lethal, imposing, and breathtaking. He dismissed Vera with a wave of his hand. He walked toward me, his silver eyes sweeping over my appearance with an intensity that made my heart hammer. No lingering doubt, Luna, he commanded, his voice a low, warning rumble. Not now. Not ever again. I am ready, I said, my voice steady though my stomach churned. I remember the pact. Loyalty, silence, and the heir. He nodded, a single sharp motion. The ritual is absolute. The high priestess will bind our souls and our intentions. When she asks for the declaration of the heir, you must project the truth of your intent into the bond. You must believe that our child is coming, that it is ordained by the fates. He took my hand. His skin was warm and firm against mine. This is not about love, Sierra. This is about power. This is about showing the kingdom we are not a temporary alliance, but a permanent lineage. We are securing the throne. The time for preparation was over. Liam led me out of the suite and into the grand processional hall. The walk was an eternity. We moved slowly, flanked by the elite silver guard, toward the massive doors of the temple, where the ceremony would be held. Every influential wolf we passed dropped to their knees, their heads bowed low. They weren't just showing respect. They were submitting to the raw power radiating off Liam, which was now inextricably linked to me. As we entered the ancient stone temple, the scent of burning herbs and potent magic was overwhelming. The entire hall was packed, the massive Lycan Council seated closest to the altar, their expressions a mixture of resentment and rigid formality. I spotted Alpha Sebastian, his eyes narrowing the moment he saw me. He was waiting for me to falter. He was waiting for the rejected mate to trip over her own inferiority. I met his gaze and held it, a deep, bone-deep coldness settling over my expression. I am the king's choice, I projected, silently focusing on the power of the crown pressing into my skull. I dare you to challenge me. He looked away first, a flicker of surprise and annoyance crossing his face. I had won that small battle. The ceremony began. The high priestess, a tiny ancient wolf with eyes the color of amber, stood before the altar. Her voice was thin but carried the weight of millennia. The ritual was long and involved, focusing on the literal merging of our spirits. At one point, Liam and I had to join hands and drink from a shared, silver chalice containing a bitter, magically charged liquid. Then came the physical binding. Liam drew a small silver dagger and cut a shallow line across his palm. He then took the same dagger and, with excruciating slowness, mirrored the cut on my hand. He pressed his bleeding palm to mine. The moment our blood mingled, the world exploded into pure white light. The power was not just external, it was internal. The full, absolute intensity of the mate bond slammed into me. It was not just our thoughts. It was our memories, our pain, our deepest fears, all flooding the shared space. I gasped, reeling under the weight of Liam's flaw, the barrier. I saw his past, the brutal pressure of becoming king too young, the assassination attempts, the cold, suffocating loneliness of absolute power. I saw his fear that he was too damaged, too ruthless to ever deserve a mate's true love. He thought she was ugly/unworthy was not his flaw. It was that he thought he was unworthy of a pure mate. I struggled to keep my feet, nearly collapsing under the emotional weight of his life. Hold Sierra. His own voice, raw and desperate, thundered in my mind. Focus on the defiance. Focus on the rage. Then the high priestess stepped forward for the final, critical step. King Liam, Luna Sierra, she chanted, her voice weaving through the magical storm around us. By the blessing of the twin moons, reveal your intent. Declare the future of the Lycan line. Is the seed planted? Is the heir secure? Liam looked at me, his eyes dark with the strain of the forced merger. This was the moment of the lie. This was the pivot/reveal that would secure or destroy everything. I fought past the overwhelming loneliness of his inner world and found my anchor. The memory of Chloe's smug face, of Brent's brutal rejection, of Alpha Titus's decree of banishment. They had called me barren, worthless, unsuited. I looked at Liam not with love but with pure, defiant, possessive will. I reached into the deepest, angriest part of my wolf, the part that had claimed the beggar, and projected the most powerful, true intention I could muster. They will not banish me. They will not call me barren. I am the Luna. I will secure the line. My child is coming. The strength of my intention, the will to survive and defy, was so absolute, so fierce, it felt more real than truth. I felt Liam's king wolf surge with immediate, undeniable acceptance of my declaration. Our mingled blood began to glow brightly. The high priestess raised her arms, her voice rising to a triumphant roar. The intention is pure. The future is secured. The Luna has unveiled the heir. A wave of potent, warming magic washed over the temple. It was accepted. The council, their faces shocked and impressed by the visible display of power, dropped to their knees. The lie was sealed by the power of the mate bond, accepted by the magic of the Lycan line. Liam immediately pulled his hand from mine, the agonizing mental link severing instantly, plunging the world back into cold silence. I swayed, feeling utterly drained but strangely exhilarated. I had done it. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of formality. When it was finally over, Liam led me back down the aisle, his pace quick, his expression unreadable. We were halfway to the exit when a young man, a minor alpha from an allied pack, broke ranks and hurried toward us. King Liam. Luna Sierra, he called out frantic. A messenger from the Shadow Moon pack. They found Chloe Price, Luna Sierra's sister. She was seen attempting to leave the territory, her hands holding a large sum of gold taken from the pack treasury. She admitted to conspiring with the former heir and the alpha to reject Luna Sierra. My past had not been forgotten. The antagonist, the deceitful sister, was exposed and apprehended. The price for my rejection was being collected. I looked up at Liam, who hadn't even broken stride. Justice is swift for those who betray the crown, he stated, his voice ringing with cold finality for the benefit of the surrounding wolves. He didn't look at me, but his hand tightened on my arm in a possessive grip. Consider that my first gift to the Luna, his thought flashed into my mind, cold and triumphant. The complete destruction of the past that attempted to destroy you. I gripped his arm back, a silent acknowledgement of the terrifying partnership we shared. I had lost my home, but I had gained a crown, a king, and a fierce, ruthless power that promised ultimate revenge on those who had scorned me. The transition from the intense magic of the consecration ceremony to the cold, stark reality of our life in the fortress was immediate. The massive crowds dispersed, the temple fell silent, and Liam and I were left alone in the vast, echoing halls, bound by a lie of an heir and a bond forged in defiance. That evening, the king's justice regarding the Shadow Moon Pact was swift and absolute. I was summoned to Liam's private study, a room dominated by dark wood and an intimidating arsenal of ancient weaponry, to witness the decree. Liam stood before a glowing projection screen, his profile illuminated by the fierce digital image of the Shadow Moon Pact crest. His face was a mask of cold resolve. The Alpha King does not tolerate treachery against his mate regardless of their station, he announced to his closest advisors, who were gathered in hushed respect. Alpha Titus has been stripped of his title for failing to protect the Luna and for enabling the conspiracy of banishment. Brent is deemed unfit to inherit and will be exiled from Lycan territory, destined to live out his days as a permanent rogue. I stared at the screen, a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow churning in my gut. Brent's arrogance, Chloe's greed, they had cost them everything. The price of their betrayal was absolute. And Chloe? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The sister who had mocked me, who had wanted my life, was now fully exposed as the antagonist. Liam turned to me, his silver eyes hard. Chloe will be held in the fortress dungeon until a final ruling can be made. Her crime is not just familial betrayal but treason against the crown. She attempted to manipulate the succession. Her fate is severe. The words were cold, but they offered a strange comfort. My past was being systematically dismantled, burned away so that only the Luna could remain. You have been avenged, Luna, Liam said, his voice softer but still lacking warmth. The kingdom now understands the cost of insulting you. He dismissed his advisors and the study emptied, leaving just the two of us surrounded by the silence of the fortress. The emotional aftermath of the ceremony and the harsh justice was overwhelming. I walked toward the window, looking out at the endless, dark wilderness. I feel exposed, I confessed, running a weary hand over the cool silver of the Luna's crown. The heir. The lie is so heavy. How long can we maintain this charade? Liam came up behind me, placing his large, warm hands on my shoulders. The scent of him, power and ozone, enveloped me. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a physical affirmation of ownership and shared fate. Until the council is fully stabilized, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. It gives us the authority to restructure the territory and solidify our power. The lie of the heir is the bedrock of our security, Sierra. It is the cost of the crown you claimed. He slowly turned me around to face him, his eyes dropping to my lips. The political crisis may be over, but the personal one remains. I knew what he meant. Our mate bond was magically sealed, our intentions unified, but our relationship was defined by the cold/distant barrier he maintained, his emotional flaw. He was my protector, my king and my jailer, but he was not my love. You are cold, Liam, I repeated the truth, using his name deliberately. I am bound to a man who gives me power but withholds every scrap of affection. The bond is a wall. He did not flinch. Affection is a weakness in my world, Luna. It creates vulnerability. I have spent my life building walls to protect this kingdom. He took my face in his hands, his touch surprisingly gentle but still entirely possessive. Yet your defiance is wearing those walls down. When our blood mingled today, I felt your raw anger, your refusal to be broken. I felt the powerful intent of your wolf, the underdog claiming the ultimate prize. That is not affection, but it is a bond more potent than any political alliance. He leaned in, his silver eyes blazing with a fierce, possessive need that had nothing to do with duty. Today you claimed the lineage. Now I must claim my mate fully. It is a necessary act to deepen the bond, to make the heir lie feel more like the truth, and to ensure that no one, especially your own wolf, ever questions the reality of our claim. It was a cold command disguised as an intimate necessity. He was stating his right, his requirement, not his desire. I looked at the absolute terrifying power in his eyes and knew I had no choice. I had chosen this fate when I kissed the beggar. To deny him now would be to introduce a fatal weakness into the core of our shared power. The loss of the kingdom's respect and by extension my own life was the stake. I didn't submit. I chose. I am the woman who chose defiance, I whispered, lifting my chin. I will not be a casualty of the crown. I will be your equal in this partnership. Then show me your strength, Luna, he challenged, a flicker of something dangerously close to admiration in his eyes. And then his lips met mine. This was not the desperate kiss of the ceremony, nor the cold, sealing kiss of the pact. This was the king's claim, a demanding, consuming act that ignited the fragile physical link that had been forged in the temple. It was an explosion of unwanted, yet undeniable, passion. The moment our lips met, the mental link snapped open fully, and I was submerged not only in his ruthlessness but also in his terrifying loneliness. He wasn't just cold, he was deeply, profoundly alone, and his king wolf was screaming for the shared comfort of a permanent mate. He wasn't just claiming a body, he was claiming a fortress against his own desolate power. The physical intimacy that followed was overwhelming. A swift, intense and magically charged act of fusion, driven by the absolute necessity of the bond. It was a merging of two wounded, defiant wolves, each clinging to the other for survival and power. I met his intensity with my own, refusing to be passive, pouring all my stored-up anger and pain from the rejection into the physical act, transforming my humiliation into the ultimate possessive claim over the Alpha King. Later, when the storm of the bond had passed and we lay tangled in the silence of the massive royal bed, Liam was the one who pulled away. He rolled onto his back, staring up at the ceiling, his breathing deep and even. He was still distant. The wall was still there, but now a window had been opened, and I had glimpsed the crushing burden of his life. Your resolve is undeniable, Sierra, he stated, his voice flat in the darkness. You are the mate the King Wolf required. The bond is now absolute. The lie of the heir will hold. I pushed myself up, wrapping a silk sheet around myself, the coldness of the room matching the coldness in his voice. And the woman? I asked, challenging his detachment one final time. Does the man Liam require anything from the woman Sierra? He turned his head slowly on the pillow, his silver eyes catching the faint moonlight. He looked utterly exhausted, burdened, and achingly lonely. He stared at me for a long moment, and for the first time since I met him, the mask of the cold ruler completely dropped. He requires you to survive this, he admitted, his voice barely audible. He requires the defiance that saved him from a political disaster. And he requires the silence. Do not ask for what I cannot give, Luna. Not yet. I accepted the crushing reality of his admission. He was a king who could command empires but could not command his own heart. I was the rejected mate who had claimed the ultimate prize, only to find that the throne was merely a magnificent cage, shared with a man who was utterly magnificent and utterly broken. I had chosen defiance, and now I was bound to a life of cold power, waiting for the day the king might finally let the man love his Luna. 2 years later. The lie of the heir had faded into the expected truth. No one on the council, no alpha, no court advisor dared to question the legitimacy of the bond or the solidity of the lineage. Liam and I had forged a fortress around the crown, built on silence, mutual respect, and the terrifying knowledge of each other's deepest flaws. I stood on the balcony of my suite, overlooking the thriving Lycan territories. The sun was setting, painting the granite fortress walls in shades of gold and deep ruby. I was no longer the frightened, rejected mate. I was Luna Sierra, known for her icy composure and her relentless dedication to the king. I was the silent partner, the powerful force that stabilized the realm. My sister, Chloe, remained locked in the deepest dungeons, her fate a political tool that Liam held over the heads of any who dared to challenge us. And Brent, the former heir, was a ghost, wandering the rogue territories, forever bearing the mark of the king's vengeance. My scars were hidden well beneath the silk and the silver crown. The deepest scar was the coldness of my king. Liam and I shared everything required of a king in Luna. The throne, the duties, the physical intimacy. We shared a mental link that was constantly active, filled with strategic plans, political insights, and professional obligations. But the emotional wall, the barrier, remained firm. He treated me with fierce protectiveness and respect, but never with ease or open affection. I heard the door to the suite open and close. I didn't need to turn to know it was him. His scent, cold metal and absolute dominance, always announced his presence. The border negotiation with the Western Pax concluded successfully. Liam's voice stated, deep and resonant. Your proposal for the tariff-free structure was invaluable, Luna. It was the obvious solution, King Liam, I replied, my voice cool and formal, reflecting the distant tone he maintained. He walked up behind me and placed his hands on the stone railing beside mine, caging me in. He didn't touch me, but the proximity of his enormous body sent the familiar potent jolt of our magical bond through my veins. It was obvious only to you, he countered, looking out at the sunset. You see power structures more clearly than anyone I know. That is why I chose you. You chose a beggar's defiance, I corrected him gently. He turned, leaning back against the railing, finally meeting my gaze. His silver eyes were as intense as ever, but there was a quiet weariness etched around them. I chose a life of cold efficiency when I was a boy, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper, a rare moment where the wall briefly cracked. You showed me that even in absolute despair there is fire. You are the fire I need, Sierra. He reached out and gently touched the silver circlet on my head. The entire world believes we are the most devoted of mates. They believe we planned this entire takeover from the moment your blood touched my lip. They believe you secured the heir immediately. And what do you believe, Liam? I asked, pushing for the answer I had waited 2 years for. Do you still see the unsuited, rejected girl or the woman who saved your kingdom? He closed the distance between us slowly, deliberately. He took the Luna's crown from my head, placing it carefully on a nearby table. He cupped my face in his large, warm hands, his thumbs tracing the line of my jaw. I believe, he said, his voice dropping to a low, rough rumble that bypassed my ears and spoke directly to my heart wolf, that I was a fool to ever think a king could remain cold when his mate is forged in fire. I believe that your defiance is the only warmth I've ever allowed myself to feel. He kissed me then. Not the commanding kiss of the king's claim, but a searching, deep kiss that was finally tinged with something resembling desire and need, something human. It was the long-awaited surrender of the man to the mate. When he pulled back, his silver eyes were dark, and the crushing loneliness I had always felt from him was slightly less intense, replaced by a fierce, possessive need that was raw and real. I am still burdened by the crown, Luna, he admitted, resting his forehead against mine. But the man Liam accepts the woman, Sierra. You are mine. Now and forever. He didn't say, I love you. He didn't have to. The simple, raw admission of acceptance, the lowering of the wall, was the truest form of devotion a king like him could offer. The defiant, rejected mate had finally, truly claimed her alpha king. And I knew, looking at the silver fire in his eyes, that the heir we had lied about 2 years ago was now a very real, very possible future. The rejected girl had earned her crown and finally, the distant heart of the king. Thank you so much for watching. She kisses a beggar at the mating ceremony, unaware he is the alpha king in disguise. I hope you felt the tension and emotion building with every word. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What was the most intriguing part of the story for you? Was it Sierra's reckless claim of the beggar? Did you think Liam would ever truly lower his emotional wall? How severe do you think Chloe's final punishment should be for conspiring against the Luna? Your subscription is a tremendous support. It means the world to me as my channel is still young and trying to grow. Please like the story and subscribe to join me for the next interesting story. See you soon.